The moving truck groaned as it pulled away, its engine noise fading until all that was left was an unsettling silence. Behind us, the old house at the end of Coldwater Lane stood tall and empty, its dark windows like vacant eyes watching our every move. For me and my husband, David, this was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh start. More importantly, it was a cheaper home, a sanctuary far from the relentless noise of the city. We'd been struggling, drowning really, ever since David lost his job. When we saw the listing online, it felt like a miracle, a lifeline we desperately needed. Beautiful Victorian home, it read. Recently restored, priced to sell. It seemed too good to be true, and by the second night, I was starting to understand why. The first sound came just after midnight, a steady, rhythmic tapping from somewhere deep inside the walls. It wasn't the groan of old pipes settling, and it wasn't the wind rattling the frame. This sound was different. It was patient, deliberate. It sounded like someone was knocking, gently but persistently, from behind the plaster. David, ever the pragmatist, rolled over and mumbled, "It's probably just mice. Old houses have them." He was already drifting back to sleep, but I couldn't ignore it. I slid out of bed, my feet cold on the old floorboards, and pressed my ear against the floral wallpaper. The tapping was clearer now, and beneath it, I could swear I heard something else. A faint, almost inaudible whisper. It was a woman's voice, a soft, desperate plea, repeating the same two words over and over, "Let me out." The next morning, the sun did little to burn away the chill that had settled in my bones. I saw our neighbor across the street, an old man with a weathered face, meticulously tending his rose bushes. Hoping for some reassurance, I walked over. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. "We just moved in. I was wondering if you knew anything about the house's history." He stopped, slowly wiping the dark soil from his hands onto a rag, his eyes, clouded with age, fixed on the house behind me. It was quiet for a long moment before he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You're the first to stay longer than a week." And with that, he turned and walked back into his house, shutting the door firmly behind him, leaving me standing alone on the sidewalk. By the third day, the atmosphere inside the house had grown thick and oppressive. Cold spots clung to the hallways like unseen cobwebs, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. The lights would flicker and die, even after we'd replaced every single bulb. And then there were the shadows. I'd catch them out of the corner of my eye, a tall, dark shape standing at the top of the stairs, still as death, only to vanish the second I turned to look directly at it. That night, after another light in the living room sputtered out, David went down to the basement to check the breaker box. He was gone for a long time, too long. When he finally came back up the creaking basement stairs nearly an hour later, his face was ashen. There's something painted on the wall down there," he stammered, his voice tight. "Under the shelves. It looks like names." I followed him back down, my heart pounding against my ribs. The basement air was cold and smelled of damp earth and rust. David aimed his phone's flashlight across the rough concrete wall. The beam revealed dozens of faint reddish-brown smears, like old blood. They were words, scrawled across the foundation. Names: Sarah, James, Michael, each one followed by a date. And beneath them, a single, chilling phrase repeated over and over and over: "Coldwater takes what it's owed." Over the next few days, David began to change. The man I married seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger. He barely slept. He stopped talking, except to mutter to himself when he thought I wasn't listening. He started leaving his phone in another room, complaining that someone was whispering to him through the speaker at night. I found him once, at 3 a.m., standing in the dark basement, just staring at that wall. He was whispering the same words that were written there, his voice a dead monotone. "Coldwater takes what it's owed." I grabbed his shoulder, trying to shake him out of it. He turned to me, his eyes wide and vacant, a terrible emptiness in them. And then he whispered, his voice not his own, "She wants you." The next morning, I found them. Deep, frantic claw marks gouged into our bedroom door. But they weren't on the outside. They were on the inside, as if something had been desperately trying to get in while we slept. That was the last straw. I drove to the local library, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I asked the librarian, a woman with kind eyes, if she had any information on the house at the end of Coldwater Lane. Her smile froze. She disappeared into the archives and returned with an old yellowed file, its corners brittle with age. Inside were dusty newspaper clippings. The headlines swam before my eyes. Asterisk family of 4 disappears from Coldwater Lane home. Asterisk house declared cursed by locals. Asterisk missing children's remains found in basement walls. Asterisk the last article was dated 1978. I raced home, my mind screaming. We had to get out, now. I burst through the front door, ready to grab David, grab our bags, and just run. But the house was silent. A dead, heavy silence. In the air smelled of damp earth and something else. Something like an open grave. "David," I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. I ran upstairs. The bedroom door was wide open. A wind that wasn't there billowed the curtains at the open window. And there, on the bed, lay David's wedding ring. Beside it, a single, fresh smear of blood. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft and cold, right beside my ear. "You can't leave me, Emma." I spun around. The antique mirror across the room rippled like water. An image formed in the glass, but it wasn't my reflection. It was David's face, pale and hollow-eyed, his hands pressed against the glass from the inside, as if he were trapped. His mouth moved, forming a single, silent word. "Help!" I screamed. A raw, guttural sound of pure terror. I ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, ignoring the whispers that now seemed to come from the walls themselves. I threw open the front door and stumbled out into the street, gasping for air. But the street wasn't there. Coldwater Lane stretched on endlessly in both directions, a gray, featureless road under a motionless leaden sky. The neighbor's house was gone. All the houses were gone. There was nothing, just an empty, desolate landscape with our house standing alone in the middle of it all. The road behind me, my only escape, had vanished. I don't know how much time passed after that. Days, maybe weeks. I stopped trying to count. The house wouldn't let me sleep. Every night the mirror would whisper my name in David's voice. Sometimes it showed me his face, pleading. Sometimes it showed me the faces of children I'd never seen, their eyes wide with fear. And sometimes, the most terrifying times, it would show me myself, standing right behind my own reflection, a twisted, knowing smile on my face. In a fit of desperate rage, I smashed the mirror, the glass shattering into 1,000 pieces. By morning, it was whole again, without a single crack. One day, I found a loose floorboard in the basement. Prying it open with trembling fingers, I found a small, black wooden box hidden beneath. Inside were teeth, dozens of them. Each one had a tiny letter carved into its surface. I tipped them onto the dusty floor. Together, they spelled my name. That night, I saw movement in the walls. Not shadows, but real movement. Pale, thin fingers began stretching through the cracks in the plaster, reaching for me. I fled upstairs, slamming the bedroom door and locking it. And then the tapping began again. But it wasn't gentle anymore. It was loud, frantic, desperate, and the voice wasn't whispering. It was screaming, shaking the very foundations of the house. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" Weeks later, after the neighbors finally reported the abandoned car, the police came. The house was empty again. A real estate agent had it cleaned, painted over the strange marks in the basement, and relisted it. They found no sign of Emma or David. Only one thing remained, freshly written on the basement wall, in what looked like red paint. "Coldwater takes what it owed." 3 months later, a new couple moved in, drawn in by the charm and the unbelievably low price. On their first night, unpacking boxers in the living room, the wife smiled at her husband. "See," she said, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "It's perfect." But as the clock struck midnight, a sound began. A faint, rhythmic tapping, from somewhere deep inside the walls.